Welcome to the video edition of The Fourth Curtain, featuring this week's interview. Catch the extended audio version with Alex and Aaron's commentary wherever you get your podcasts. On with the show.
Welcome to The Fourth Curtain, friends. Today we are joined by someone I've known for many years from his days as founder and CEO of Proletariat, Seth Sivak. Seth, how are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
You look great.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you got a big smile and your color looks good. You got a nice webcam.
And he's standing.
Seth started,
we have like the stand-up desk here. That's good.
Gotta have energy for the podcast. Yeah, so I figured I'd stand
good
up.
Energy. Proletariat started in 2012, and I remember this because it was around the same time we were launching Industrial Toys, and you guys got your start on mobile as well. But like smart people, shifted focus to the PC, eventually releasing Spellbreak in 2020, and then getting bought by Blizzard, where Seth went on to become the VP of a tiny little game called World of Warcraft. Nice run. And I know you did a few sizable funding rounds in there. I think you did. Did you get to like a C round?
Yeah, we ended up raising 5 rounds of funding, technically. Yeah. So
5 rounds of funding.
We raised the biggest one was Take-Two led in 2019. That was a $20 million round at $100 million pre.
Wow. Okay. Good for you.
Good for you.
Yes. I also recently discovered your blog, Boss Battles. I found it on Substack, but I think you have your own site. I don't know exactly how.
What is the website?
Is that a thing? You're pretty prolific. Do you write on that every week or what?
I wouldn't say prolific, but I've been doing it for almost a year now. And yeah, writing every week. And I had all these notes that I had taken over time from starting Proletariat. And I always told myself I should write these as blog posts just so I had them for myself to look back on if I wanted to do this again, or if I wanted to learn some of these lessons. And it's actually been incredibly helpful to write it out. So yeah, I've been doing it every week for almost a year.
And what's the URL?
It's just sethsivak.com, but also there's a Substack, and I post it to LinkedIn as well these days.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff about team culture, leadership, things that we chat about quite a bit on this podcast. So thank you for being with us. Great to see you. Welcome to the show. How are you? You already said you're great, so I'm going to just chalk that up as a 10 out of 10. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I mean, since I left Blizzard, I had been working on doing some advising and some consulting work, and that's been really fun. It's interesting, and you've probably experienced this, Alex. I think you've gone through the entrepreneurial journey a few more times than me, I think. But there's, I don't know how long Industrial Toys was, but the Proletariat experience was almost 10 years. It was 9.5 till we sold, and then I ended up staying almost to 11 years when you count all my time at Blizzard as well. And it was been really interesting to come out of that experience. And a few folks had asked me, hey, Seth, why don't you just jump in and go do an AI startup? And I see it more, the idea of jumping in to start a company is terrifying to me because it took 10 years to sell, to build and finish the Proletariat era. And so I've been enjoying actually doing a variety of different projects and actually being an individual contributor a bit again. I mean, when I was at Blizzard, I was working with, and even at Proletariat, really large teams, hundreds of people. And it's been fun to kind of get my hands dirty on some stuff, work with some teams very closely, work with some startups very closely. And so that's been incredibly rewarding.
Awesome. What's your background? So when you started Proletariat, were you entrepreneur, engineer, designer, all the above?
I never thought I would, I kind of always felt like I wanted to start a studio. I didn't think it was going to happen when it did. We ended up starting Proletariat because we all got laid off from Zynga. So I joined, my undergraduate degrees in mechanical engineering, and I went to grad school for computer science. And so I started as a gameplay and graphics programmer, predominantly doing design and programming at a really small startup that was called Conduit Labs. And that was we were doing social music games on the open web. It was like, what if you did a music version of Puzzle Pirates was kind of some of the idea. And this is before Facebook games. Yeah, I know. This is before Facebook games were really big. And so then we pivoted to Facebook games. And we made a game called Music Pets, which was kind of what you would expect. It was like Pandora, but you'd feed your pet music and it would bring you back more music that you liked. And that got enough traction early on in Facebook for Zynga to acquire the company. And so we became Zynga Boston. And so at that point I moved. They didn't really know what to do with me. They were like, you're an engineer and a designer. You can be one or the other. And that kind of broke my brain. And our CEO at the time was like, Seth, you should become a product manager. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but that was the black magic voodoo that, that Zynga was bringing to the game space. And I thought that would be a good thing to learn. And so I got my product management education on Mafia Wars and Cafe World during the kind of like heyday of those games. Cafe World was 8 million DAU or something at the time. And that was the amount I learned in 6 weeks as a product manager writing daily reports on Cafe World was just a tremendously valuable education on product management.
Wow. So that's super fascinating. Can we pause there for a second? Because I would love to get your opinion, point of view, perspective, whatever, on what is a product manager. I know that's kind of like maybe the most simplistic question. You just dropped your drink. Most simplistic question you can imagine, but like it's a newish.
Yeah, that's kind of where they started, like the Facebook Zynga. Right?
Yeah, and I think Zynga probably one of the originators of that role, maybe Scopely one of the perfecters of that role, but it seems to mean something different. And for those of you who aren't like hands-on making games as a job, like product manager is what? Like how would you simply describe it, and then how would you sort of like describe that education that you got, like how to change the way you think, etc.
So I think at Zynga, the idea was like the product managers are the CEOs of features. So they would like own entire features end to end. And that era of Zynga and of Facebook games specifically, it was such a closed ecosystem that you could really lean in to being not like metrics informed, metrics driven. You had all the inputs and all the outputs. You could track everything. You knew every notification someone was getting. You knew every click. You knew every direction. And so that allowed people with very analytical backgrounds. The typical Zynga PMs at the time were often MBA students that were like very coming from much more of an analytical background. And so I was this like weird outlier on the Cafe World team because I was also an engineer. And so I could go in and like fix stuff in the game in Cafe World. We were writing everything in Flash at the time, in ActionScript. And that was like super rare. Like they didn't have, I think I might've been one of the earliest folks at Zynga on the product management side that came from a more design and engineering background rather than a much more analytical one. And so in a lot of ways, product managers, I think, are very similar to designers, but they're often a bit more of a combination of designer meets project manager. And they're at Zynga, they were responsible for the success and failure of a given feature. So you were shipping typically every week or every other week at Zynga. And so you often were working on 3 features at a given time. You would be product managing a pod, which would be, a group of cross-disciplinary people that would be able to build a feature. Typically, you would be coming up with that feature, speccing that feature, building that feature, making the decisions on the ground as that feature's in development, launching it, managing the A/B tests as it launched, because almost everything at the time was being A/B tested to optimize it. And then you were reporting the results and coming up with basically what did that teach you? What did you learn to then impact the roadmap for your next feature? So you were often analyzing the last feature, developing the current feature, and planning the next feature at a given time. And so it was sort of a crazy, like the pace that product managers needed to work, it was like really crazy. But because you could make these changes, like you would go in to the experiment website and you could make these changes, and you had so much liquidity in terms of the number of people coming in, 8 million DAU, meant you could run all sorts of experiments and be like, within 15 minutes, you were like, oh, this thing is too difficult, switch to the other experiment where we're giving out twice as much XP. because you could see how quickly people were moving through it, and you would make this decision within 5 or 6 hours of like launching a feature to basically optimize it for the optimal outcome you were specifically looking for to either improve retention, revenue, whatever metric you were targeting. So it was very metrics driven.
Yeah, metrics.
So it also is a combination of like, these are action script games. So like to develop a feature could be measured in days or weeks, not months or years.
Super fast. But these were big teams, right? Like you're, and I think, I don't know if that's the cleanest example of a product manager, but in a lot of ways they are often designing and coming up with the feature, making the decisions for the boots on the ground, and are held responsible for how that feature performed.
And when you say feature, you mean like mechanics to bring the player back, mechanics to hold the player for like a certain amount of time, like these kinds of features.
So examples would be
do you remember any?
Yeah.
Do you remember any where it's like, oh, this is the greatest feature I did?
One of the biggest ones we did while I was on Cafe World was there was this catering mechanic. And so catering missions were groups of people could group cook. So you basically had a target goal where, like, say the three of us could be doing a catering mission that would require 6 apple pies, 12 milkshakes, and 5 pot roasts. And like, I could contribute 2 pot roasts. You could do, Alex, you could do 4 apple pies. I could do the other 2 apple pies. And during a given window, once we started that mission, we had like 24 hours to cook all of it. But like, we could all contribute together, and then we would get rewards for that. And so that feature was really geared towards, one, there was this metric that we really cared about at Zynga at the time, which was your active social network. And this was basically the number of people that you interact with within a given day. And it turned out that if that number was above like 3 or 4, you were much more likely to return the next week. Where if that number went below 4, you didn't have enough other friends playing, that you were much more likely to churn. And so we were looking at trying to engage active social network. We were also looking to try and to increase revenue, because it turned out that these were tuned very specifically, that it would be very difficult for the 3 of us to get all of those dishes done without spending a little bit of currency to do it. Yeah. So that's an example of like one of the features, right?
Really cool.
You love that, huh? You love that?
I think it's fun. It's like, because you're looking at data, right? Like, I bet you probably I'm assuming this happened, where you changed one little number that like affected everything in the game. Like, you gave 1 too many apples that then caused like revenue to go down 15%, like just because of 1 apple or something like stupid. Like
you would see all sorts of crazy. I mean, like there were so many lessons that I learned while I was at Zynga of just like kind of wild behavior and kind of how people would play games, the way it would work. And one of my other favorite examples is the poker team added the ability. So the way original Zynga poker worked on Facebook is like, you would put money in, but you could never take your chips back out. There was no real money component. So you'd buy chips and you'd use them to accrue them, but you could never, there was no way to get the money back out. They added this mechanic where you could tip the dealer, because that's just something you would like do in real life. People would just tip a dealer if they had a good hand. You're just giving your money away to Zynga, and people would do it. And it was like an astoundingly good revenue mechanic. And it was because it just modeled real life behavior. And we saw this as well with like CSR racing, where people would spend money on things that they attributed value to in real life, even though it was in the game. I'm not a big car person, but they were really into some of the car pieces. And I was amazed that some would do way better than others. And it turned out that those were just the more expensive parts in real life. People would just be like, oh, of course this should be more expensive.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to see how mapping to real life behavior would impact the behavior of what players would do.
Yeah, I bet you they thought they were getting better cards. Like, if you tip the dealer, I swear I always get pairs. like little things like that.
I mean, this is
but that's how Vegas really works. Yeah.
Games are full of this, though. I remember when I was in a raiding guild, hardcore raiding guild in World of Warcraft in vanilla, there were all sorts of superstitions on the right way to beat Onyxia. And it was like, you got to add more debuffs, and that will make it so she doesn't do her, flame breath or whatever. And it's when you get in there to the actual game, it's like, no, that's all superstition. None of that's actually true.
That is funny. All right. Well, so you kind of start at the startup that gets bought by Zynga, but before that, I think were you at Carnegie Mellon? Were you in that entertainment technology Jesse Shell program?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I was part of that program from 2007 to 2009. I pitched a project there that we were working on. It was actually a Wii game. We were building a Wii game. We hacked Wiimotes. So we didn't have Wii dev kits. We hacked Wiimotes and a dance pad, and we were making an active adventure, what we called an active adventure, which the whole purpose was to make an exercise game that didn't suck, was our goal. And so we built this over a couple of semesters, and we actually submitted it to IGF in 2009, and we were in the student showcase. And that was one of my first experiences going to GDC.
Oh, cool.
I think. But then in between my first and second year, that summer, I worked in Imagineering. So I was in the creative technology group in Imagineering, doing a lot of like 3D graphics work and pre-visualization and things like that. It was so cool. We got to work on a wide variety of projects for, I worked on Radiator Springs Racers, Toy Story Midway Mania, a bunch of projects for for the cruise ships, things like that. It was
Midway
really cool.
Mania. Was that Jesse's game?
Jesse Show.
Yep.
Yeah, he did that.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
I
That game's
remember
awesome,
that.
by the
Okay.
way. That's a great game.
I knew where
And
all
so
the secret Mickeys were, and I could get the high scores because I had a build on my on my machine, and we would go to Disneyland, and people would be like, "How are you getting?" Because they had a high score. They had a high score thing, and I would constantly be at the top for like 6 weeks in a row, and it was because I just knew where all the secrets were because I had the build on my machine.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's becoming notorious for the people that were working at Disneyland.
Nice. So you spent a summer out here, like in
I
in
lived
Burbank or Glendale.
I lived just over the just outside of downtown Burbank and Glendale, and would walk the like mile and a half to Flower Street because I was a poor grad student, and gas was like, this was Great Recession time. Gas was like $6 a gallon or whatever, and I didn't have the money to do it, so I'd be the only person walking to the office. And I remember,
there aren't even any. Yeah, there's no sidewalks.
There's no sidewalks. To go to Flower Street.
Yeah, it's like a hobo walking down the street.
It's true.
Well, it gets hot. All right. Well, so cool. We're a big fan of Jesse's that program. We've had folks come, work in our studio. Obviously, did use good service, and you sort of get this PM education, project manager education at Zynga, but then it's that. After, I guess, the shutdown, is that when Proletariat started? Like, what was sort of the genesis of starting your own studio there?
Yeah, so we did the acquisition into Zynga. We flew out and we all lived in San Francisco. There's only 12 of us as part of the acquisition. The company was really small. We did that, kind of immersive onboarding, and then we all went back to Boston and we started to work on a game there. And I moved I stayed on as a product manager for about 9 months, but then I became the lead designer of the project we were doing at Zynga Boston, which was...
What project was that? Yeah.
So that was Indiana Jones Adventure World, although it was not Indiana Jones until like 3 weeks before launch. It was very much not Indiana Jones. So
how does that work? All right.
Yeah. So we knew we wanted to do an adventure game, and that was part of the whole thing we were trying to do, but we didn't have the license. And so I don't have full visibility at the time as to all the things that were all the moving parts, but I think what was happening is Zynga corporate, like the main entity, was negotiating with Lucas around some of the licenses, and they saw Adventure World and they were like, this thing looks really close to Indiana Jones. And we were trying to be right up to the line of Indiana Jones without being Indiana Jones. Like we didn't put a whip and a fedora in there.
The ad, and
but everything else was very. It was that time of adventure. You would run into Amelia Earhart. You were going for relics, and you were trying to find El Dorado. And so we ended up having to spend all day on a Sunday, like meeting with the legal team. I thought we were gonna not. At first they were saying, hey, maybe we'll make this an Indiana Jones game. And I was like, whatever, we'll figure it out. And I got pulled into a room late on a Thursday night and was told we were launching the next week. And the mandate was put Indiana Jones into this game. And so I went and worked with the team. I actually wrote a bunch of code myself.
The week before.
It's awesome. like 10 days. I remember did you GM,
even get time for brand approvals?
So we had a great person at the time. Her name was Nina. She did this for a long time for EA as well, who managed the relationship with Lucasfilm. But we ended up. I remember our GM was I got a lot of kudos because I had thought a little bit ahead of time to write a bunch of dialogue for Indiana Jones and put it through localization, because it took like 6 days to get things localized. And I had written a bunch of dialogue for Indy and got it localized ahead of time. So we were able to actually use it in all the languages that would be necessary at launch. And then I went in and wrote a bunch of code myself to put Indy into the first time user experience. So he would parachute in and you'd be able to experience it. And so that game came out. It launched, it did pretty well in the early days of it. It wasn't as big as Cityville, but it did well enough. Certainly from a budget standpoint, it did pretty great. It ended up, that was right around the time though, that was in 2010, late September, October 2010, something like that. So then, or no, that was 2011, sorry. That's and then going into, we were acquired in 2010. So it was about a year later. And that was a crazy time. I learned a ton there. We went from 13 people to 65 in 9 months while building this game. It was crazy. Wow. And we built the whole game in like less than 12 months to ship it. And so after that, I moved on to a different project that was on the mobile side. So we were working on a mobile project. We had pitched another Facebook game internally, but Zynga was sort of bouncing around between, hey, this Facebook stuff feels like it's not going great, but the mobile stuff we don't really understand. Do we have a mobile unit that just focuses on mobile? Does each team responsible for doing mobile?
Right.
We just started to work on a prototype that actually got a bunch of traction internally. And so I moved into an executive producer role with a 20-person team that was on a mobile title. And I remember some of my experience working, this is when Zynga was getting really big. We had just, IPO'd a little bit before this, about 6 months or so before we were all laid off. And I remember one of the things that we had this little prototype that everyone in the office was playing, this mobile prototype. And I really wanted to move it through Greenlight faster because I felt like we could launch it in 3 months. But the Greenlight process at Zynga took at least 6 months to get any of this stuff done. And I remember there was this huge spreadsheet, and I just took it upon myself to go through every single line and just see how much faster I could move it. It's like, oh, legal needs 12 weeks to approve. I would go find the person in legal and be like, hey, could you do this in 6? and so it was just this kind of constantly trying to move through to get it to actually ship. And so we were caught by surprise during the layoffs. So I'd started to have a couple of conversations with some of the Proletariat founders, because right around this time, Heyday and Clash had shipped from, and you saw these mobile games, you saw the growth of tablet gaming. And we thought you could make these games with a really small team. We were building this game internally at Zynga with a pretty small team compared to what the Invest and Express games, at the time, Cityville was 150 people. We were doing this with a really small team. We'd started prototyping this original game with 2 people. And so we felt, hey, maybe this is good, but then I got promoted and I didn't want to leave right away. And so we kind of put it on ice, and then the layoffs happened. And so that gave us all, we had 3 months of severance that we could stretch to 6. And so we felt like if we didn't have healthcare by 6 months in, we would go find jobs. So that was the way we approached it.
Right on. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's what we did, right? Alex, I don't feel so good. I gotta go to the doctor. Hang in there.
We it's funny because I think in some ways when we shipped our first mobile game, Zynga actually hit us up on the corp dev side and wanted to meet with us, but at the time everyone had turned over, so they didn't know the genesis of the Proletariat team. So they didn't know who we were, and it was just funny because I kind of wanted to go to the meeting and be, hey, you guys seed funded this, with the severance, you seed funded the our first project. So, but yeah.
So did you basically bootstrap your first game, or when did you raise money right out of the gate? Were you thinking, hey, this is like a scalable VC backable enterprise here, or were you just like, let's just make a game? Which any?
I mean,
do you remember?
Yeah, no, I do remember. So this was World Domination was our first
World Domination.
And I think Alex, we met just after that, because I think you guys were working on your first title at Industrial Toys, and we got introduced from some mutual friends or something at some point, I think. But yeah, so we got laid off in October of 2012. We started the company in November, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I just started to talk to folks that I knew from the gaming side. There was a cohort of other ex-Zynga founders starting studios Mike Verdu had started a studio, which I don't know, Alex, if you know Mike. And
Mike was one of my like 6 bosses at EA that I had over the course of like 9 months.
Yeah, because he led mobile for a while there, right? Twice, two different times, 2 different
Mike's
tours
great.
of duty.
Mike's
yeah. But Mike was one of those, and I reached out to a few folks just to ask, how should we go about this? And at the time, mobile was the Wild West. There wasn't a clear, there were no game investors. That didn't exist from a venture capital side. There were some folks that had done some investing in social game companies and things like that, but it just wasn't, no one would consider themselves a games only investor. Maybe there were some that would be like really small, like LVP maybe have started around that time. I can't remember some of those folks, but we started talking to whoever we could, but at the same time, we wanted to ship a couple of small projects by ourselves just to build our muscle again with the 5 of us, because we had all the components we needed. 4 of the 5 founders were engineers, and the 5th one was our art director. And so all 5 of us, we made this game. The first project we did was this thing called Hug the Sloth, this is a Jesse Shell thing, but one of the things they teach you at Carnegie Mellon is they have this concept of a gold spike, which is the gold spike is what they use to connect the Intercontinental Railroad. And the idea was that you wanted to get every piece of the pipeline in place. So for us, we wanted to build and ship a mobile game that had 1 in-app purchase, 1 push notification, 1 Facebook login, 1 timer, every single thing we thought would be part of the game that we wanted, the bigger game we wanted to make. And so this game was exactly what it sounds like. You would log in and if the sloth needed a hug, you would hug it, and then it would be a random amount of time until you could hug it again. There were in-app purchases where you could purchase hats for your sloth. And we had to go through all the process of getting a Dun & Bradstreet number and an Apple, account to be able to ship and actually launch this thing on iOS. And that was super valuable for us to build all the muscle to do that. And then we started to work on a slightly bigger game called Letter Rush, which was like a multiplayer word game, because we knew we wanted to make a multiplayer game. So the next step was like, let's build a multiplayer game that we can ship in like 2 months. And so we started to do that. And at the same time, we were having a bunch of different conversations. We were talking with some folks from Gree and other mobile publishers. And it was like, do you do a mobile publishing deal? Do you do a equity deal? How does this work? At the same time, I was starting to talk to angel investors. And originally we were thinking, could we raise $500K to go do this? And then it became clear we actually probably needed closer to $1 million. And so we got our first term sheet for $1 million. We ended up actually raising a bit over 2 because there was enough excitement. We got really lucky in timing, because right around the time that we ended up really getting our first term sheet was about a week before there was this massive secondary from Supercell. And so a bunch of VCs all of a sudden became super interested in the game space. And so I think we got lucky. We had a good story, a bunch of ex-Zynga people. We had already built some stuff. We'd released a couple of things. We could show that we could move quickly. We had kind of a complete team with the founding team. And so it allowed us to raise about 2.25 million, I think, or 2.5 is what we raised in our seed.
And this was 2012 or
2013. This was in April of 2013. Yeah.
Right on. Okay. Can we pause there for a second? Because this idea of the golden spike and your approach to laddering up your capabilities is super fascinating.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. I love that. So
yeah,
golden spike, that's a thing, huh? I've never heard that phrase before.
I never heard it that way.
So I mean, I love it as a concept. It's something that we used. We tried to do a lot of new things at Proletariat. We never really felt constrained, so we would move to different. Even with Spellbreak, we treated this the same way. And a lot of it, I think, comes to building muscle. We started to ship regularly on Spellbreak incredibly early. We ran a beta that was cross-platform between the PlayStation and the PC before we went fully wide with full cross-platform crossplay. I'm a big believer in the best form of planning is to just do it and build the muscle. And so that was the way we approached it was to continue to try and build our capabilities by action. And I think with something like a gold spike, picking something that is small, that is digestible, that is something you can get through quickly, proves out so much of what you want to do, and allows you to have this near-term horizon know, like, okay, we want to try this, we want to build to the next thing. And at the time we had a bit of the space. And it's not like we, our first game then we built on top of to go to the next game. Actually, we moved from Unity to Unreal in between game 1 and game 2. But I think a lot of the processes,
why not? Why not?
It just made sense at the time. We were moving from, a more isometric strategy game focused on mobile to a like PC focused third person action game. And so that just made sense to move to Unreal. But
so let me ask you a couple questions. Like, cause, I do love that we've tried to do similar things with the studio that we're in now, largely because at Industrial Toys, I think we took we took big swings, and taking the small, you learn so much more quickly if you're shipping, were you ever sort of kind of debating with yourself, like, either is this good enough? Like, can we actually release this? Is this good enough? Is this meaningful enough? Were you ever sort of in the debate between that and, hey, can we make this smaller? You know what I mean? Like this thing that we're planning to release, could it have like half the features it has and still be a thing we should release? Were you ever having those debates? Too big, too small?
Yeah, I think so, a bit. But it didn't really come out as this is too big or too small. It was more, how quickly can we get feedback on this thing? That is either us playing it or other people playing it, or actual, feedback from, data, any of those things. And I think the interesting thing of going through the cycle as a PM at Zynga, where it was so metrics driven, it meant that you ended up with this situation where I think some games came out that didn't have the right balance. When I think about the right way to manage making creative direction decisions, there's 3 key components. There's basically what the designers want to do. That's like the actual creative direction, what's in their soul, the type of experience they want to build. Then there's the qualitative feedback, which is like what do players tell you they want. And then there's the third piece, which is like, what do they actually do? Which is the data, right? The quantitative side. And I think the right way is to balance those, right? But the question is, how quickly can you start to get one of those 3 pieces? So can you start to get feedback from, hey, we're just trying this ourselves, subject matter experts? That's in like the first bucket. Can you start to get some small number of play testers in there? They'll tell you what you want. You maybe don't have full tracking and analytics in there. You can't know what that's going to be. But each one of those things, the closer and closer you get to what you think the final experience needs to be, the more and more valuable I think you get from the variety of different pieces of feedback that come back to you. But for us, it was always a push of how quickly can we get something out? How quickly can we get something out and then iterate? And it was just all about velocity to iteration. And that was the way we approached it with Spellbreak. Like, when I look back now, when we did the pre-alpha for Spellbreak, I'm amazed because there's so much placeholder art, like gray textures, things that weren't in there, but we had tens of thousands of people playing it. And I think that's something that whenever I talk with teams now, when I'm advising them or whatever, they're like, it's just not ready. It's not ready for people to see it. And I think there's often a tendency to wait way too long. And I think it's, especially when you're in a low risk environment, no one knew who we were. No one knew who Proletariat was. We released something early. No one's waiting with bated breath for our next thing. We have to go the opposite direction. We have to make people give a shit. And so in that way, we really need to get it out early, build excitement, do what we can do. And if we have something that we think is like minimum viable, like emotional feedback, can we get anything? Can we get a rise out of people? Can we get some excitement? Can we get any interest? The sooner you can start to get to that, the better you can start to build on it, because you don't know how long you're just going in a direction where it's just never going to work. Like, I see some of these games, I think the biggest failures we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, they're games that just had no audience. No one cared. And they waited way, way, way long to announce it. And it's like, oh my God, you've waited so long. Do people even, but people don't even want this. It seems like no one, it's not that like they came out and they got super low scores and therefore it's like, no, they come out and they like do okay. They get a 7 out of 10 but no one buys it because there's no audience for it. No one's excited.
Right, and they could have figured that out, in the first couple months.
Way earlier, hopefully.
$40 million sooner.
or in some cases, way more than that, right? So, yes.
Are we going to go back more? Oh, I'm sorry. You want to stay? Alex,
No.
I'm really.
I was just going to say, I really like those philosophies right there. I try to live them. I do often ask the question of how much is enough for it to be meaningful, and I don't know that I have a other than just. I mean, it sounds like your sort of point of view is as quick as possible. Doesn't really matter how small. As quick as you could get something. That's the start of the iteration cycle. And that's when things actually start. That's when you're able to deliberately move things into a quality direction, is when you can start that iteration cycle.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that I think is maybe a bit more in the, you need a nose for it or some amount of taste for it, which is, it's so hard to break through with games. It's so hard. It's so hard to find a thing that gets people excited. And so if you have some idea on how to do it, how quickly can you test if that key idea, that key innovation, whatever it's going to be, is exciting enough? And so we're jumping ahead a little bit in the timeline, but when we were prototyping Spellbreak, one of the things we did is we actually built a battle royale mode as a mod for Dota 2 before the official battle royale mod was built by Valve. And it's because we had a bunch of ideas on things we wanted to test with fantasy battle royales, and we got 40,000, 50,000 players. Valve wouldn't give us dedicated servers, and I think it was because they're working on their own version for it as a mod. But it was, hey, we can get a bunch of ideas in here on the core idea we had with Spellbreak was this idea that battle royales are roguelike, multiplayer roguelikes for people who don't play roguelikes. So how can we build these RPG roguelike elements into some games like Dota? And so we built it as a mod because it was way faster to build as a mod, release it, see if we can get an audience engaged, start a Discord, start talking with people, get feedback, release a couple of updates, and see it. Is there there? And I think we ended up moving away from it. One, because I think we were worried that Valve could just release their own battle royale mod, and if we had to go make our own version of Dota and then go from there, it was going to be really hard. But a bunch of those ideas we explored ended up making their way into Spellbreak, like a bunch of the ways we did skill blending and a lot of that stuff.
And that was intentional. That was like, hey, we have a thesis around a game idea, and this would be the fastest way for us to kind of test if there's something.
We built two prototypes at the same time. So we built the Dota one. So we're skipping ahead, but that's fine. We
go really far. That's like, what is baby Seth? I want to go.
Aaron wants to go. Yeah, he wants to go back to the beginning. He wants to know like what you were like in high school.
Sorry, yeah. It's not to like, because I don't know. I think it's interesting. Like, you have all this energy. Like, we're doing this and we're doing that. It's like, that's awesome. Where did baby Seth get like to that?
We'll be right back. If you like what you're hearing, like and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. And now, a word from our sponsors. Great games aren't just made, they're crafted. Pixel by pixel, idea by idea. Amber doesn't just develop games, Amber forges the future of play, one project at a time. From the magic makers at Disney to the tech giants at Amazon and Warner Media, the biggest names in the industry trust Amber to turn their wildest ideas into reality. Why? Because the talented teams at Amber believe in pushing every boundary, breaking every mold, and having a bit of fun while they're at it. Need a partner who knows the game and plays to win? Amber has the talent, the passion, and a global network that's ready to roll. So let's skip the loading screen and get straight to the action. Discover how Amber can power up your next project at amberstudio.com. Do you want your game to live forever? To supercharge it with immense powers of endless content, a buzzing gamer community, immortality, and coin? CurseForge for Studios, an exclusive service for visionary game developers, allows you to add safe, cross-platform mods to your game and enjoy all the benefits of user-generated content without any of the risks. With CurseForge for Studios, you can harness the creativity of our 165,000 devoted creators and the traffic of 43 million monthly gamers. You can also level up with premium mods and grant your game new revenue streams. Trusted by AAA studios, CurseForge for Studios is an immortality potion for your game. Enter studios.curseforge.com and join the UGC era. Leveling up your game dev career but not sure where to start?
Maybe you're trying to break into the industry, looking to connect with other people who are making games.
Consider joining the International Game Developers Association, the IGDA, the world's largest nonprofit member-driven professional association serving all individuals who create games.
I was in the IGDA in Chicago, met a lot of people, great way to network.
The IGDA exists to support and empower game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers.
Discounts,
Educational and advocacy-based resources,
mentorship.
and solidarity across 160 plus chapters.
To join the IGDA, visit igda.org/membership and use the code IGDA 4th Curtain 15, no spaces there,
To get 15% off 1- and 2-year memberships, as well as a student membership.
Joining the IGDA is a great move for your career, and as a nonprofit supporting everyone making games, it's a great move for the whole community. Join today. Hey listeners, it's Alex from the Fourth Curtain.
And Darren here, we want to give a quick shout out to the team at High Vibe PR.
High Vibe PR is our boutique communications firm. They're all about companies and brands defining the future of gaming, entertainment, and culture.
Look, when you're doing something big, you need the right people to help you tell your story. And High Vibe PR, they're the best at making it happen.
Absolutely. They've helped us at Look North World level up our messaging, connect to the right audiences, and stay ahead of the curve in this ever-changing industry.
So, if you're looking for a PR partner who gets gaming and entertainment like no one else, check them out at highvibepr.com.
That's highvibepr.com. Go give them a look. You won't regret it.
And now, back to the show.
You know,
You mean as far as, so I mean in the story we were telling, we're at the company is now funded, and so we start building World Domination, and that was the game we were always planning to build. Even in the first pitch decks, we actually had a screenshot mock-up concept art that actually looked very close to what the final game was going to be. And so fast forward a year, we put it into a geo-locked beta. And this game was really interesting. Go ahead.
I mean further back. Like I like
No, literally,
Mario.
he like what's the origin?
Yeah, 'cause it's
story?
where did all
Like,
this
where
come
did you
from?
grow up? What did your parents do? Did you have a computer in the
Like, what was
house
your
with
first
technology
computer?
on your radar? Were you playing
So-
games? You know,
yeah,
I'm
like
one of those
formative.
because you said a
Formative.
lot of stuff. It's like, well, where did all that juice come from, dude?
I'm kind of. What were the dinner time conversations like in the Sivak household growing
Yeah.
up? Because I gotta imagine it was spicy. It must have been your energy.
I'm
Yeah?
one of those, some people in the game industry, they're like, I came out of the womb holding the controller. I knew I wanted to make games. Like that was not me.
Okay.
I grew up, so my first console, so I have a identical twin brother and an older brother. And I grew up in an age where we didn't have consoles in the house until I was in middle school. I think I was in like 8th grade, and we got an N64 was our first console. But my parents would let us play PC games. So we were allowed to play all the LucasArts games, all the adventure games, because that was the type of stuff that my dad was playing, and my mom and dad saw that as a little bit more educational than like Doom. We weren't allowed to play shooters. We weren't allowed to do any of that. We could play Civilization. I remember spending hours and hours playing Civilization. And I remember
But your dad was a gamer.
he was playing Myst.
back.
He was playing King's Quest. I remember playing King's Quest with him and things like that. I remember him bringing home, it was some F1 racing game where we had a racing wheel with like you put the mouse on it with the ball, and you would drive with the wheel.
Right.
And this is the time where, in order you could just pass the discs around. And so the way they would do copy protection is you'd have this like paper wheel that you would need to like rotate the like cipher to figure out the codes or whatever. And he brought home one that had clearly been like photocopied and cut up to like fit. And so he obviously didn't buy that piece of software.
Oh, all right. Dad was a gamer
so-
and a pirate. Good to know.
Yeah,
He was
okay.
light up, right? Like he was smart.
So it's so
Good memories.
So we because I grew up with two brothers, we would often play almost every game, even if it wasn't multiplayer, because we would just like we pass the controller, we'd swap seats, we would do all those things you would imagine. And then, the reason why I bought an N64 instead of like a PlayStation is because there were 4 of us. So we wanted things with, or 3 of us. So we wanted things with 3 controllers or more for multiplayer.
GoldenEye. Do you guys play GoldenEye?
Yeah, tons of good GoldenEye, lots and lots of GoldenEye. Ocarina of Time was my first Zelda. And still one of my favorite games of all time, without question. I remember spending just hours and hours and hours playing Ocarina of Time and trying to find all the golden sculptures. But I was interested in games. I always enjoyed, playing games and got really into games, as I continued through high school, really into Diablo 2, StarCraft, all the Blizzard games. Was very hardcore in World of Warcraft when it came out. I was like a main tank in a raiding guild all throughout my undergraduate time, spending 30, 40, 50 hours a week playing World of Warcraft.
Oh, what an awesome full circle story here.
What does that feel like when you're working on that and you're,
It was fun. It was pretty interesting to sort of see on the inside and get a chance to meet a bunch, because there's a lot of people that are currently on the WoW team that have been on the WoW team. You meet some of the people that are the namesakes of some of the folks, that some of the things that are actually in the in the game itself, and it's always really cool. But I there were no game degrees, didn't exist when I was going to school. My parents were very much like career focused, and so I went into mechanical engineering really with a focus on being an aerospace engineer. And so my undergraduate at Northeastern University is amazing because it allows a co-op program, which I think every university should require. So it makes it a 5-year program, but you do 3 6-month co-ops, which are basically working full time. So you get a chance to, 1, get a bunch of experience. So you're much more likely to come out with a job at the end. But 2, you get to see if you actually like the job.
Yeah.
Right. So I spent the first 2 of them working on Hanscom Air Force Base here out in Massachusetts, in Lexington, Mass, at MIT Lincoln Laboratory as an optical systems engineer doing defense work. So I worked on satellites, missile defense, that kind of thing. And I realized I hated it. And I wanted to do something more creative. And so that's why I went to Carnegie Mellon for grad school.
Okay. All right. So did you end up in Boston because of Northeastern, or
I
did
grew
you
up
grow
about
up
an
in that
hour
area?
outside of Boston.
Okay.
In northern Massachusetts. But I went to Carnegie Mellon with the express goal of becoming an Imagineer. And so I got a chance to do the internship at Imagineering. And I think, 1, I didn't love living in LA. Again, it was like a tough time because I was so poor that I, couldn't really experience. I think a lot of what LA had to, and I really rented like the world's tiniest room. And also just the timing was really tough. When I was coming out of grad school, I had a full-time offer to go to Imagineering, but all my friends at Imagineering were like, don't come here right now, because 1, all of the cool projects have been cut because the Great Recession. Disney World is a once in a lifetime vacation for most people. So when there's a big recession, it would get really heavily hit. And so they just
like
cut
2008?
all the projects.
Is
2009.
this
2009. I graduated in 2009. So I did my internship in 2008 and then graduated in 2009. And so I had a full-time offer, but I didn't take it. And because the advice I was getting from folks was like, go somewhere else for 2 or 3 years, then reapply to Disney so you can come in at like not an associate level.
That's when I took my job at Disney was 2009.
So you were working in the park stuff though. Like, so maybe digital was a bit different. Although I think it was maybe all under the same umbrella, but that, from there I had been building games at Carnegie Mellon. I was like, hey, I could probably do video games, even though I really wanted to do location-based entertainment, and took an internship at the company at Conduit Labs, which then converted to full time.
Right. Okay.
And that's how I got here.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, cool. All right. So let's go. Let's get back to Proletariat and World Zombination and Spell. There were some other games besides World Zombination and Spellbreak, right? There's one in between.
Streamline.
One in between.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's right. I remember Streamline. Yeah. It was like built for like
streaming
players and streaming, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll try to pick up where we left off. So in 2013, we raised the funding. May 2014, we do a geo-locked beta for World Domination, and we're building it out and we're continuing to go. And I'm learning a bunch of really valuable lessons on how the hell you actually network, to try and get someone on the Apple editorial team to care about what we're doing.
This is a great topic. Like, what did you learn? Because I had a lot of people, Aaron included, are always asking me like, how do you network? Like, how do you what is it like? Make friends and change minds. What is that book?
Yes.
To get to like you or something like that.
The win friends and influence people. Yeah.
That's it.
It's worth reading like every couple of years. There's some good stuff in there. But I think so what ended up happening is because of the Boston scene, I knew Kelly Wallach. And Kelly was running the Indie Mega Booth at the time.
Oh yeah.
And so I somehow talked her into...
She's an investor in our studio. She's awesome.
I love Kelly. But I ended up basically talking Kelly into giving us a mini booth spot in the mega booth at PAX Prime in September of 2014. I think. And while we were there, I got connected with someone else who was like, hey, do you want to come to this dinner that Apple's putting on? And I was like, yes, I do. And so I think basically, the advice I would give on networking is to try and make yourself valuable, like do a favor for someone else first, if you possibly can, like pay it forward as much as possible. And also the best advice I can give you is to just show up. It's super awkward. I've been doing this. I've been in the game industry. I was a CEO for 10, 11 years. I still cannot walk up to a group of people that are having a conversation at like a, happy hour and just introduce myself. I can't do it. Like, it's just so awkward every time. I'm terrible at it. I'm that person who's just going to like sit by themselves in the corner and wait for other people to come up to him. So it doesn't get easier. But I think the best advice for networking is try to pay it forward as much as possible and just show up. So if there are events, go to those events and do the work to actually go get business cards. When we used to give out business cards, I used to come back from GDC with like bags full of business cards from all the meetings I would try to do and all the people I would try to meet. But my goal was to try and get some connections at Apple because we wanted to try and get the editor's choice. We showed them what we were building, and they ended up coming by. They actually ended up seeing the game at, earlier that day before we were supposed to go to this dinner. They came by the Indie Mega Booth and they were like, this looks so cool. Like, are you coming to our thing tonight? I was like, hey, I actually got an invite. That'd be really great. And so I got some of the connection there. And then from there ended up talking with them, and we showed them what we were building. And they were like, hey, we're doing this thing, this new graphics thing called Metal, which allows you to do graphics work like directly on the hardware. And what we were doing with World Domination was these huge flocks of zombies. So it actually was like pretty intensive. And they were like, hey, if you can push this really good, maybe we'll do something interesting with you. So they actually ended up putting our little Proletariat logo was in the Apple keynote that year because we were like one of the games working on Metal. So fast forward a bit to February of 2015, and we end up going to ship World Domination completely. We ended up with it was a little scary towards the end because Apple had just changed their policies to actually make us pull all the guns out of any of the marketing material, which like, this wasn't a shooter game, but like it was a game where you shot zombies. But then they ended up letting us through after like 10 days, and we got an Apple Editor's Choice. And then we were the best iPad app of February. And that really accelerated what we were doing with World Domination. But we were really happy. We were like, it was amazing to get that recognition. I think it helped put us on the map. The problem is about that summer, so 5-6 months later, we were just watching CPIs like double, triple, quadruple like every month. And we knew we
CPI
could probably...
is cost per install, right? So like how much money you were paying, to get players.
And so we had been able to like really increase LTV, like our lifetime value of our customer. We had done a ton in the 9 months we were in our kind of like geo-locked beta to full release, but we knew we could only really market at super small scales, and it would be barely enough to really break even the studio. And so we thought we should do something else. So we ended up supporting World Domination for 6-10 more months, something like that, and moving on to something new. And the one of the things we did in early 2015 that was really interesting is we were partnering with these YouTube influencers who were creating content. They weren't even called influencers at the time. This is like pre the influencer era, I feel like. And we would have them put an affiliate link for the game below the videos they were making. And we would pay them $0.25 per install for those installs that came through that link. And these would be customers that we make $15, $20, $30 on. And that was super small scale because you have to do individual contracts with individual YouTubers. And I remember explaining to our lawyer what a YouTuber was in 2015, which was actually harder than you would think. But we saw this opportunity with this shared influencer ecosystem, and really, how can games distribute themselves? How can you build games that are also these content creation tools? And so we ended up, and also at the time, Twitch Plays Pokemon exploded. And we were looking at this and we thought this could be something really cool. What if you did a shared experience where you had a live streamer, an audience, and a bunch of players all in one shared entertainment experience? And so we started to build Streamline. And so Streamline was a 16-player sort of arena sports game. You would kind of do this parkour running around as a big game of tag. So the influencer was the person who was it. Their job would be to go and hit the other players. The other players would be dodging and jumping and trying to collect all these different points as they were running around. And then the audience would do things like vote for modifiers. They would put in slow motion or other changes. And so they'd be voting, they would make bets. The thing that people actually love the most is the influencer would get badges. Like if they got a double hit on two different players, like a double kill, they would get this badge and they would play bingo with the badges and this was all integrated into a website we built as a viewing website for it.
Super cool.
And so that ended up getting enough attention from Amazon that we ended up being the first game to be part of Twitch Prime. So you would get Spellbreak for free via Twitch Prime. We were also the first game available for Streamline was. We were also be the first game that was available to buy on Twitch. So people don't really remember this because it was a short period of time, but Amazon was trying to compete with Valve, and they built this whole store on top of Twitch with this idea that you'd give the influencers some small cut of the money. They would be able to feature the games as a buy button underneath, and you would buy it. They'd acquired Curse and they built their own launcher.
That's right.
And so all of this happened in October of 2016, and it was a disaster. The launcher didn't really work when it launched. They had lost the major deal they wanted, and they ended up going with just this smaller Hearthstone deal, which didn't drive anywhere near enough people. They told us their low bar estimate of the number of people that were going to install into Streamline the first month was going to be 500,000. And we were like, okay, cool. We'll cut that in half and have that be our target. So we'll estimate 250,000. It ended up being 16,000. So it was less than 5% of their target. And so we were like, we're done. We're going to run out of money. Because we did this as a small minimum guarantee and then pushed more for royalty ownership. And we couldn't launch on Steam because we ended up launching on Steam eventually, but you needed a Twitch account. And so we were getting these terrible reviews on Steam because people were like, why do I have to do this with Twitch? And so anyway, so that led us to kind of the very first true near-death experience with Proletariat. We ended up experiencing several others along the way, but that was the first one where we ended up, we had about 5-6 months of runway, and we had to figure out what to do to try and
how'd you navigate that? That's not uncommon. Many startups run into those situations where they get to a funding crunch. What did you do?
It was a very difficult, in all seriousness, it was a very difficult time. I'm not gonna lie.
Have you ever gotten down to 1 month?
We have been that close. We have been close enough where it's been, hey, our investors came in to give us a bridge where we had a signed term sheet, and it was going to be, we were going to be tight on the next paycheck. And so we have been there. Basically every year from 2018 through 2022 when we sold, we had some point where we were less than 2 months of runway in the bank, which is just stressful, very scary.
It's amazing your hair's not gray.
Oh, it is. The headset hides it.
You still have it though, so.
But yeah,
so you have you had these expectations with this big deal with Amazon. It's hey, we're riding high, and then things don't quite go the way you want, and now you're looking down the barrel, and you're like, okay, you're gonna have to figure something out. How did you navigate through that?
Was literally just shake every tree possible was my approach. And so I remember this happened in in early October. And I flew out to Amazon in late October, and I was like, hey guys, you need to help us. And they're like, nope, we're not helping you. We're actually moving away from this. We're shutting this whole thing down in 60 days. And I was like, okay. So then I was like, all right, I don't know what to do. And we did a board meeting, and the board was like, I don't know, maybe see if you could get acqui-hired somewhere. We don't really know. And I was like, all right, well, let's try to figure this out. And so I remember it was Thanksgiving, and my wife and I decided to like go away for a couple of days before Thanksgiving, and we ended up going on a trip up to Montreal. And I spent 2 of the days that we were there, like she went out and just kind of hung around and went through the city. And I spent 2 of those days just nonstop phone calls to everyone I could imagine, asking if there were deals, pitching everyone we could imagine. We did pitches for Warner Brothers, for NBC Universal. We pitched projects for anyone and everyone that had an RFP. And we also, I was talking to strategics. I go and talk to Unity. I went to talk to whoever we could. And we ended up getting a little bit of traction with Tencent. And Tencent at the time hadn't really done any smaller deals or any early deals. They'd only done really big ones. They had done the big Epic deal. They had done the big deal with Supercell. They had done a bigger deal with Hi-Rez. So they had done these later stage ones. But they had brought on some new partners, and they thought it was really interesting that we were willing to do what we did with Streamline, that we had learned some lessons around how to build for influencers, how to build content that would go really viral. And so I remember this was late January, early February. And I remember the partner at Tencent at the time, John Lai, who's now at A16Z, he called me on a Thursday night because he was in China, I think. And I thought it was just the like, hey, thanks for talking with us, but we're done. And he came back and he was actually like, we want to lead your B round. And he's like, and I was like, oh my God, that's so awesome. He's like, the downside is tomorrow's Chinese New Year, so we can't get you a term sheet for 2 weeks. And we were basically on this Thursday, we had decided that the following Monday, we would tell the team that we're going to shut down the studio. So it was literally like 72 hours before we were going to close the studio.
Oh my gosh.
And so our investors moved really quickly. They got us a bridge round of $200,000, which gave us like a month or 2 of runway. And so we could negotiate that deal, and Tencent led that round. And that was what led us into basically the next phase, which was Spellbreak.
Wow. Okay. So can you say how much that round, like how big was that round, the B round? Can you say?
It was meant to be 8 million, but we ended up only getting about 6.5, something like that, 6.25. Okay. And so it was Tencent leading, and then our existing pro rata. And that was basically a flat round on the previous one. And so we ended up at the time, people think now it's like bad for gaming VC. Like I totally agree, but also that era, which you lived through this, Alex, so you probably remember. But 2016 going to 2017 was also a like frozen tundra of game investments. Yeah. We were in this like back half of the console cycle. All the VCs had done big bets into like esports and VR, and none of that was panning out. It was going way longer than people thought. So there was just this retreat from anything, and like no one was really flush. And so there just wasn't much happening. And so it was very difficult. Like you couldn't find, and like publishing deals weren't that common. There wasn't much going on. Cause this is like, I think this is like this is like pre the Switch really blowing up and getting big. Like, you know what I mean? There just wasn't like the industry was just
and a lot of investors they had done their run on mobile. They weren't looking at mobile as fertile investments anymore. I remember that period of time.
That's when we were trying the VR games, and you got sick.
we were doing similar kind of soul searching of like what the next act was going to look like for us. But so super impressive that you were able to kind of go from your experience with Streamline to landing one of the most sought after investors in games, Tencent, to lead a B round. That's pretty cool. Did you have, was that, what do you attribute that to?
Luck,
timing, or like a match in strategy. Like you had something that they were like actually searching for.
I mean, I think it was what was the latter. I think, certainly luck. I mean, whenever someone asks me, what what was the secret to success with Proletariat? I mean, part of it is like have a great team, but the other part is like stay alive long enough to get lucky. But with Tencent,
alive, job one.
with Tencent, they like I said, they had not done smaller deals at all. We were literally the first one in the strategy. So we were the very first deal, and we fit this idea where they thought, hey, what if we do equity investments in some of these like North American companies or some of these companies outside of China? And kind of part of it was to build relationships. Part of it was maybe they could be the publisher for our games in China, because that was really the bread and butter that worked for them with League, right? Like is they brought League to China, and that's where it made, it made good money in outside of China, but like China was really the major market. And so I think so that was Tencent. It was a match in strategy. They wanted to start doing more investments. They wanted to start building more of a strategy outside of China. And we just happened to be right in the bullseye at the right time. And like I said, I just shook every tree I possibly could, sometimes multiple times. And just was like, hey, is there any deals, anything you want to work with us on, any pitches? And we had pitched Tencent a couple of ideas on how we would build off of what we had learned for Streamline. It wasn't Spellbreak yet. But it was early ideas. And so we started to kind of move in that direction.
Right on.
We've said it before, right, Alex? What are the three? It's persistence, luck.
Yeah, talent. You need 2 out of the 3: persistence, luck, or talent. And if you have all 3, you're set.
Slam dunk. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but so I'm just looking at the clock. We got to talk about Blizzard. Like, how did that whole thing happen?
Yeah, we can. We can accelerate to basically the sort of Spellbreak era. So just to really quickly go from here. So we ended up moving off of Streamline and messing around with a bunch of stuff on the live streaming space. We'd actually built a bunch of projects in collaboration with Twitch, because we never learned our lesson that it wasn't going to work out well. And then we started to see, we were like, okay, what are we going to build next? We got this money. I remember having this moment with the other founders where I was like, we just raised $6 million and we were so devastated. Like my confidence was so shook that I was like, I don't know what to do with this money in games to possibly get a return on this investment. And so we ended up just kicking around a ton of ideas, and we really wanted to have something. We knew that we wanted to do a new IP. We wanted to self-publish, but Proletariat's not a big name. We're not well known. How do we possibly do this? And so we build a game that can really distribute itself. What's the distribution advantage we can bring? And so we were looking at this game called H1Z1. And this was one of the first battle royales. It was super popular on Twitch and on YouTube, but we felt like it wasn't like, it could be so much better. And so we were like, what if you did a fantasy version of this? This is a roguelike for people that don't play roguelikes. It tells a great story. It's a content creation engine. People can just make endless content with it. And so that's when we started to experiment with different ideas. So the original 2, one was called Ragnarok, which was like a Viking themed Souls-like battle royale. It was all melee, very slow, methodical combat. I could go on and on at length on all the different ways that melee battle royales are incredibly hard to make and have all sorts of issues. And then we were working on that Dota 2 mod. 6 months later, fast forward 6 months, we decided to kill the Dota 2 mod and really lean in to doing an evolution of Ragnarok. And so we tried combat 5 or 6 different ways, and we couldn't make it work. And then we ended up just one of the founders, we started to do more range stuff. It started to get more interesting with range. We added magic arrows, and then he came back after a week, and he was prototyping a bunch of stuff all the time. And he was like, hey, like, what if it's all magic arrows? And it was really all magic spells. And at that moment, he did this thing where 2 of the spells combined together, and we're like, oh my God, we have something. And that was the very first thing, was this idea that you could throw down a poison cloud and then light it on fire. And it was just like, we saw it and everybody was just like jaw dropped. And we were like, this is going to be so cool. Like we want to make an action combat game that's fantasy that doesn't feel like reskinned guns. How can we make like fantasy magic combat feel cool and interesting? And so now we're in early 2018. We had an art style that no one liked, but our art director was on paternity, and we're like, hey, when he comes back, we're going to like talk to him about this. And we got back and we thought it was going to be a really difficult conversation. He's like, oh yeah, I hate this too. Let's do something else. So it was great. And that team, no lie, put together this diorama for this style that was like a more mature version of Breath of the Wild's painterly style in like 6 weeks before GDC. And I brought it to GDC, and people played our like gray box playable that was a 5v5 team deathmatch with these really cool spells and everything. And they were like, yeah, that's kind of cool. We get how this could eventually become a battle royale, but this art style is incredible. And so we ended up just doubling down on that. And we built out more stuff in the battle royale. We pitched everyone you could possibly imagine at GDC and then E3. We ended up getting 2 different term sheets that both got pulled back. And I was like, we need to just get traction because we were going to run out of money in October, November timeframe. And so we ended up going into in like pre-alpha. We started to put content up. People went nuts for the animated GIFs for the game because the art style was just so resonant with people. And so we went from 5,000 people in our Discord to 10,000 to 30,000 to 60,000. And it just started to build momentum. And then we did this, we put out this like trailer on YouTube that was just a 90-second gameplay clips of the pre-alpha, and that went mega viral. And so overnight, we went from like 60,000 people in our Discord to like 120 or 150 or something. And all of a sudden, we went from 0 term sheets, which we had a term sheet pulled from us like during the middle of this from a Chinese company that basically was like, actually, we shut down all of our US operations and laid everybody off, to then all of a sudden having like 12 or 13 term sheets. And so that's when we ended up partnering with Epic. And there's a bunch of stuff I'm glossing over here of how close we came to running out of money in that point as well. But we did a deal with Epic to do distribution for the game. So we were the first non-Fortnite multiplayer game on the Epic Game Store. And so we ship on the Epic Game Store in February of 2019.
And
I think our lives
semi-exclusive window came with a little bit of advance or something, right?
Yes, exactly. So that helped
Smart.
us. I mean, that was amazing, right? We basically got an advance, which allowed us to continue to fund the project. And so we raised money 4 times to get Spellbreak out the door. So we were like every year. But we, the one thing, like if I could look at a different timeline of Proletariat's experience, we were going to launch on a Tuesday. On the Epic Game Store, and we were going to lift the NDA and we're going to let everybody share all their stuff. We started to hear these rumblings about 5 or 6 days before we were going to ship about another battle royale coming. And literally the Monday before we ship, Apex Legends launches. And it just takes all of the air out of the room for like a month and a half. And so
EA spent, I think, $1 million hiring like all the big streamers.
It was like $90 million. It was not like 1 million. It was a lot. But anyway, we still did pretty well. We still got a good amount of traction. We were still growing pretty well. Continued development through all of that. Ended up doing a series of announcements when we were going to bring it, raise more money, later on in 2019 with Take-Two, and then moved to basically do full cross-platform crossplay on day one. So we were going to be the first game to do that on day one, and we were. And so we started to do development across everything, including mobile, which we never ended up shipping. In 2019, we announced on PlayStation we were going to do a PlayStation cross-platform beta, and then COVID hits. And so we're still like a relatively small team, like a 50-person team. But we knew we had to scale like crazy to like 100, 120. But when COVID hit, that really shifted everything because our development partner for the Switch and mobile versions was in Japan, and they basically just couldn't work. They couldn't go into the office. They couldn't work. And so we had to end that contract. We shelved the mobile version. We brought the Switch version in-house, which is another one of my things that I wish I could take back. Like, I think we should have maybe just shelved the Switch version as well. But because we ended up having to take the gameplay team off of like doing iteration to the combat and gameplay work and everything to get the Switch version done in time. And so we ended up launching without a battle pass. So the battle pass came in like 8 weeks later, just because we couldn't fit it all to try and get it launched in time. So Spellbreak launches in September of 2020. We get great growth early on. We launched if there was one other thing I would have done, I would have raised a bunch of money to actually get marketing because we only had about a $4 million marketing budget. We probably needed like a $24 million marketing budget. And so we just felt like we couldn't sustain and keep up with basically Apex and Fortnite and Call of Duty, right? And because they were, PUBG wasn't free yet, but these other ones were, and they were spending tens of millions of dollars a month on marketing. Like it was just too hard to keep up. And so, come around to 2021, we knew we had to do something else. And that's when we started to work on other projects. We started to pitch other projects. We started to figure out what we could potentially do differently. And we ended up starting to have conversations with Blizzard in October, November of 2021. And it was all around this idea of like, maybe we come in and co-develop an expansion for WoW, because they just like wanted to do more content for WoW, which is what they've been doing since the acquisition. And you know, they've been able to get a lot more content out, and the players love it. Like there's sort of there's no lack of appetite for new WoW content.
Right.
And so then, you know, we ended up starting to have a series of meetings right around April that got really serious really quickly, and we ended up selling the company in late June of 2022.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, April to June?
Yeah, it was a 90-day window, basically. I mean, we started the conversation a little bit early, but they weren't about acquisition. It was just about like,
yeah.
And Blizzard saw us as an opportunity because like we had a stylized art style with Spellbreak. We showed what we could do there. We had experience with running live service, and they really wanted to try and increase the cadence of the amount of content they were getting out. And Proletariat, or like me, I didn't really have much to do with some of this stuff because they were already on a path to like ship every 8 weeks for World of Warcraft, which before that they were shipping every like 3 to 4 months. So this was like a big step up in the amount of content they were shipping. But they saw that as valuable. They liked the Boston location because they wanted to try and get away from the cost of talent in Southern California, and the fact that basically like they felt like it was so competitive. We had great access to schools and other things like that in Boston. So there were a lot of great things that really fit with what they wanted to do with the future of both like World of Warcraft and the broader Warcraft franchise. And so it ended up being, for me, I mean, I saw the opportunity as like, you know, I loved World of Warcraft, you know, had thousands and thousands of hours, was a hardcore raider for a long time, saw the opportunity for what, you know, future of MMOs could look like, what World of Warcraft could become. And I mean, even now, seeing how big World of Warcraft Classic has become is like so crazy to me, to show the opportunity. I think, you know, it's really difficult to build new MMOs, but man, like that's basically a new MMO. So
yeah. So I mean, like a couple things. One, incredible journey, and it's a great like lesson maybe of how you can find opportunities from lots of different contexts, like through those conversations you have with Tencent in that period during Proletariat, or with Blizzard. Like you guys found a partner who was trying to do the thing that you were doing, not necessarily, you know, ship a game and it's got a 60% margin and it's throwing off $100 million a year in free cash flow. That's not the only outcome that leads to success or to great partnerships. Often it's about alignment. You know, it's like trying to do the same things, help each other out. I think that's pretty cool.
It's interesting. The one thing I would say on that is like, I think there's so much value in building these relationships over time. Like the person who connected originally on the World of Warcraft opportunity was a guy who was running basically all of third-party development for Activision. And we had talked to him way back in 2016. I had taken a meeting with him about potentially doing a mobile game with the Call of Duty IP. And we had built that relationship. I remember we had this we had this ritual where for whatever reason, like 3 or 4 GDCs in a row, we were always each other's last meeting on the Friday. And so it was like, so we'd go a little bit over, we'd have a drink, like we, you know, and I think those things are really valuable. And I was on a panel recently, this is not that recent, I guess like 6-8 months ago, with a bunch of startup folks. And like, I was the geriatric startup founder there because a bunch of these other folks are more recent. And one of them was like, what do you do if like an investor reaches out right after you've raised? Like, should you engage? Should you not engage? And the general consensus on the panel was like, no, man, heads down, like, don't worry about it. Like, you know, like just it's a distraction. And I take the other side of that. Like, I think a lesson that I learned going through the first near-death experience at Proletariat with the Tencent deal was just always be pitching. Like every 3 months, there are so few partners that you know that can make it work, that you should always be talking to them about like, what are they looking for? What incentives are aligned? Like, how does this work? Because the timing is so important. And so if you just only pick your head up when you're running out of money, I think you're going to be in a way worse place that like, talk is cheap. Doing a 30-minute call to build a relationship with someone, to meet them for the first time, to invest in a little bit of that, like there's no way you are so focused on what you're doing that you can't spare that time. Like, I don't believe you.
That's great advice. And it's easy to talk. Well, maybe not for everyone. Aaron, what do you think? Is it easy to talk to people?
Yeah. I mean, if you need money from them.
Well, this is more the inbound, right? Like, if someone wants to talk to you, would you turn them down and be like, no, not right now, I'm too busy.
Yeah.
And I was like, don't. Like, for me, I would always just like, maybe I'm, a bit old school on some of this, but I think, like, if corp dev team reaches out to you, if you're a startup person, even if you have zero interest in selling, zero interest in raising money right now, like, take that call.
Yeah.
Talk to them for 30 minutes. Now, if they're going to give you a runaround of like a bunch of due diligence, like, say no. Right. But the idea that you wouldn't start to invest in this, and I think especially in games, because there are so few partners, and and often these partners change strategy every 90 days. So that's like right. What might have been what wasn't a good idea at GDC is all of a sudden a good idea at E3. And no, E3 doesn't exist anymore, but like that kind of window, like that happened numerous times for us. And you'd be amazed like what 6 months of time can do to a strategy. And so the idea that you would like only check, like, it was just always be pitching. It was just constantly talking to people. This is what we're doing,
Yeah, you said something earlier, which I thought was pretty interesting, which is like you kind of characterize yourself as a little bit of a wallflower. You go to the party and like you're not the one who's going to walk up to anybody to A, I don't believe that. But B, it made me think just how opposite that is from anybody. Like there's probably some of you listeners are probably gamers, maybe all of you. But if you get into an adventure game or an MMO and there's an NPC around, you're going to go freaking talk to that character, right? You're not going to not talk to that character. Like, how are you going to win this game without talking to that character? It's like, okay.
Life's a game.
So life's a game. Last question from me. What was it like for you to make that transition from startup guy, figuring out how to like, shit, we got 60 days of payroll left. I got to hustle, get out the Rolodex, to go from that to now you're like an exec at Blizzard.
Yeah. And then what was it like to install the first thing you worked on
and like play it,
Yeah, I mean, well, the WoW thing is even funnier because my parents, they're retired. They're in their early 70s and they play WoW every single day, and they have since like 2000, like they have since like 2010 or something.
No
and
way.
Did you like totally juice their accounts for them?
I did not. I did give them a lot of Blizzard swag though. They have benefited from that. But so I did have like and I had some fun kind of going back to some of the people that I used to raid with are still playing WoW. And like never stopped. I mean, I stopped in grad school. I just became too busy and too focused on other stuff. And so I stopped around Wrath of the Lich King, but some of them still played to this day. And so I jumped back into the Discord, found them, and like played a bunch with them while I was still at Blizzard. And so that was really fun to kind of reconnect with these people. It's like, some of these people were people that I'd spent thousands of hours with. Right. And so the transition question, I think, is like a really difficult one. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that I think, there's a lot of lessons. There's a lot of differences. There's it's just a different job. There's a different job to be building and managing an organization. It's a different job to surf the wave rather than create the wave. And I think it's something that, I'm still, I mean, I left Blizzard like a bit over a year after I joined, and I did what I wanted to do, which was go in and really integrate. And I left. So the Boston team has really been focused on a few different projects, but the big one that they were really supporting was the next expansion, which has been announced. It's called Midnight, and we were going through the green light process for that, and I didn't want to be part of that if I was going to leave, and so I felt like I had to leave before that kind of got all the way through the green light. So the real answer is like I think I'm happier in the let's build some stuff, let's make some waves. And I think I'm happy of the work that I did. I think I came in and it was helped to really, both like, drive. I was tasked with building out a live service team for WoW because it didn't really have one that was really focused on ongoing events. And so some of the work I did, I'm tremendously proud of. I got to sit down on a lot of the creative, some of the creative meetings, which, getting a chance to work with someone like Chris Metzen, who's a total force of nature, and was like, I definitely had to pinch myself a couple of times when I would blush a little bit if Chris thought I had a good idea. But I think it's the transition is it's just a totally different job. It's a totally different focus, and I think for me, I wanted to get back to closer to the games. Like I was getting pulled further and further away into the operations side, and that was something that I felt like I was capable of doing it, but it was really what gets me excited every day, what gets me closer. I had multiple levels of people between me and like the people that were building stuff, and that was something that I really struggled with. And I just wanted to own something. I wanted to like really drive a project and be able to like be more hands-on with it. And that wasn't what was really needed for me at the time. So.
Yeah, I can relate. Yeah. You've got the entrepreneur blood coursing in your veins.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of building stuff, and so it was fun to build some of the teams and things like that. But it's just, it's a different job, and it was a grueling time at Blizzard because there was like a lot of changes happening. And there's still a big bunch of changes, and it's something there were a lot of shifts. There's a lot of work to, the WoW machine is incredible. Like that game, I think I got a whole new appreciation for that game, for that game as a business, for all the moving parts. Like that thing is 20 years old, and still such a juggernaut, and it's incredible.
Insane how
it's just like the people that work on it, the amount of passion, the amount of effort, like that people bring every single day. And some of these people have only worked on this one game for their 15, 20, 21 year career, and it's incredible that they still can like get excited about it. Like it's amazing to me. And the level of the level of focus required to continue to push themselves to make better encounters, to try and one up themselves on what's going to be the better quest. Like they've been sitting at the top for so long that so
it's really interesting that the way this industry has evolved, and games like WoW, and maybe even you can put games like Roblox and Fortnite into that category, as well as games that have attracted such a large, loyal audience. It's had, I think, a big impact on sort of the shape of entertainment, like interactive. It's like what people play, how they consume it, and just like how the industry works. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, Seth, we've kept you way long. You're such a good sport. And such an incredible, just that whole, like you've had so many chapters in that Proletariat story. Lots of really interesting lessons popped out. Thank you for sharing. Super cool.
It's my favorite Indiana Jones quote. It's not the years, it's the mileage. I feel like I had a 10-year run at Proletariat, but it was really like a full 40-year career when I look at all the stuff we did. So,
but you look great. Thanks again. And best of luck on the stuff that you're working on now. Not that I know anything about it other than it sounds super cool. So can't wait to see you next time at Yes. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you around.
Cheers, Seth.
Thank you for listening to the Fourth Curtain Podcast. Visit us at thefourthcurtain.com to find our monthly newsletter and support the show via Patreon. The Fourth Curtain Podcast is a production of Fourth Curtain Media. Lovingly edited by Bryen Hensley of Noise Floor Sound Solutions. Production support by May Lee, with community management by Doug Zartman and art production by Paul Russell. Thanks again for listening.